a virus, a mental virus, because these include Aristotle's works. And Aristotle and Plato are opposed to one another. For example, with regard to the soul, for Plato, our souls are the main part of us, it's eternal. The main point of life is for us to make sure that we're protecting our soul, which doesn't want to do anything with the physical world. The physical world is corrupting and corrupts our soul, so we want that aesthetic soul free from corruption. And so you try to avoid attachment to physical things. Remember, that's the same with Buddhism. I think idealistic Confucianism as well. So that's the axial age. The religions from that axial age are going to be like that. But Aristotle is physical. Everything is in this world. Your soul is part of your body, and your body ceases to move. That's pretty much the end of the soul. So if you're going to live for your future, you want that future to be now. You want to have a good time now. You want to have good things now. You want to have good friends now. Good, everything. You're focusing on here and now, not avoiding all of that stuff so that your soul, which he doesn't think exists, right? So why worry about that? It's fake. Don't even think about it. It's a fiction. Okay? So instead the focus is on the here and now. And think about that when it comes back into Europe and starts persuading people. Do you think that's going to have an impact on the church? Yes. It certainly does. And by the way, that wasn't the only route. It also came into Europe through the universities in Spain, which, remember, they were run by the Islamists that lived in Spain until the Spaniards under El Cid chased them out, right? The Moors chased them out and then basically transformed society and said, no more wokeness, no more putting up with other cultures and letting people do their different things. Everybody has to be Catholic now, or else, etc. And but while the universities were there, that information, of course, also trickled up into Northern Europe. So what we end up with around 1100, 1200, 1300 is a transformation of the thinking in Northern Europe that added Aristotle. And in fact, they started referring to Aristotle as the philosopher, no one else. Because as far as they were concerned, Aristotle knew everything. We didn't know about all this stuff, but now that we have the books, and more of the books come in and they get translated, and as they get translated, everybody starts becoming an Aristotelian, which of course creates all kinds of problems for the church. Causes the Reformation, actually. So when you see the earlier reformers, they're reforming because they don't accept the new theology that's a result of the merger of the church theology with Aristotle. And so you end up with this transformation theologically. And by the way, then comes along the scientific revolution, which results because now that Aristotle's back and people have had hundreds of years of doing logic, they apply the advanced logic skills to the new incoming books of Aristotle, and you end up then with people realizing that Aristotle was wrong about a lot of things. And that's very upsetting, because by then the church had adopted Aristotle, and it was really annoying to have someone criticizing Aristotle, like Galileo, for example. Gravity, Aristotle thought things naturally fell to the place where they wanted to be. And in fact, one specific example was that the heaviest thing falls faster than lighter things. But that's actually not true. And we have a demonstration of that. See if I can find it.
takes 3 hours to contact the 800,000 feet. 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 1, release.
Bowling ball on a feather, falling in a vacuum. I wish they didn't actually slow it down. Would have been neater seeing it fall. Because you know it's falling as fast as the bowling ball.
Do you know how much they slowed it down?
No,
I was going to say, if you did, you could just speed it up and see.
that's true.
Look at that.
So,
Exactly.
so Galileo was right, and that proves that Aristotle was wrong. So, of course, Galileo couldn't have done that experiment because he didn't have this huge vacuum that they use for space studies. But in any case, what I wanted to try to show was the impact of Aristotle on all, even Europe, even though it took a while for it to come back to Europe, was the belief that all knowledge has already been figured out. You need to find out something, just read Aristotle. He knows everything. So it's like nobody has to do new studies or new science to find out anything. All you have to do is know where to go in the library to read what Aristotle said. And there it is. You're all done. Study Aristotle. And that's everything. Pretty amazing, considering. So that was impressive if you think about it. This guy has created such a system of knowledge. But by the time you get to Kant, there are all kinds of problems. And so when Kant comes up with his categories, you end up with 12 categories instead of 10. And you get quantity broken up into these 3, quality broken up into these 3, relations broken up into these 3, and modality broken up into those. So there will be a shift at that time. So you'll see why when we're doing Kant, why Kant is so significant. Everyone today in the Western world is considered to be at least a Kantian. So if you're not in agreement with Kant's philosophy, you haven't had enough education yet. Go back to school. But after that, then you end up with a couple of splits, which is kind of interesting, which we'll cover as we get to those. Okay, so pretty interesting stuff, but either way, his writing is dense. I love the way the biologist says it's dense, it's impenetrable, etc. And yet it's magnificent, he says, right? And why is it magnificent? Because it says everything. Turns out he's wrong about a lot of things, and that became what was called the scientific revolution. You probably have heard of it called that, right? The scientific revolution was a revolution against the science of Aristotle. So that's kind of amazing, right? So he had come back and was so important that when they began doing experiments and realizing some of the important things he said were wrong, that created a scientific revolution, because now individuals wanted to go out and find out what else was he wrong about. We don't know everything. We thought we did, but now we know that he was wrong about a great many things. Sorry, I sound like the Emperor. Star Wars. Yeah. Wrong about a great many things. Sorry. Shouldn't try to imitate the Emperor. Shoot, then I got lost. Where was I? This is important stuff, obviously. That's Snape. Sorry. All these memes just, they take over. What do you do with them? Let's talk about ethics, because that's our next suggested reading. So obviously we have the metaphysics. Notice it's a whole book. I don't think anybody ever gets to the kinds of things he talks about in the back, but that's important. But if we want to think about the ethics, there's 2 books on ethics, but the one that everyone really tries to read for him is the Nicomachean Ethics. And he starts off talking about the nature of the good. Remember, with Plato, they're trying to figure out what these words mean. So their dialogues are definitional. What is virtue? Arete. So what kind of virtues are there, etc. But what is the good? What is the pious? Part of what gets Socrates in trouble, not being pious, right? For Plato, you get this ideal good, which we might also associate with the concept of God, right? That, there's just the one good. And out of that, we get all these things that we think of as good. And so the Platonists are trying to figure out, so what is it in this that makes it good? What is it in this that makes it good? And they're trying to figure out what this good characteristic is that they all have in common. And they can't quite do it. And they figure, well, that's because my soul is corrupted by my body. I can't understand it until I'm free from this prison house of the soul. Yeah.
So they're trying to categorize things that they see into the form good.
Yes.
Which is a teleological argument. Explaining phenomena for the purposes that it serves rather than the causes from which
Yes.
it derives. Whereas Aristotle is like more of an empiricist, obviously, so he isn't arguing like not.
It's interesting though, because of course he is a student of Plato.
Yeah.
And so there's a tremendous impact on Plato on Aristotle. Like, all men by nature love to know. Well, that's a Platonic feeling, right? And it makes you feel like, the only life for a human is one of study and learning and so on. That Aristotle, of course, spent his life doing, right? But yes, it is a very different attempt to understand things. Plato uses discourse, the dialogues, to try to figure out what is the good. Aristotle comes along and says, no, every art and every inquiry has its own good. Well, we're talking about good pizza. Well, there's a certain, we love good pizza. Well, maybe you don't. I don't know if you like pizza or not. I can't stand Moose's Tooth pizza. What on earth are they doing? They're putting the kitchen sink and everything else in a pizza. You go in and they ask for a pizza and they look at the ingredients and you think, that's not a pizza. You can't put cucumbers on a pizza. Sorry. Another TV show. But you get the idea. Not everybody likes the same things on pizza. What things do you like on pizza? What is a good wife? Wow, am I allowed to even ask that today? Interesting question. But some males might be. By the way, I highly recommend young males find the smartest woman that will marry them, and then do what they tell you to do. Because women are much smarter than guys, and they're much more focused on what we need, for the future and so on. So, males that marry and stay married are much better off than, etc. Right? And by the way, I have a fascinating person who argues for this. And a book coming apart. By the way, it's titled The State of White America because an earlier book he co-wrote with Herrnstein, was called The Bell Curve, and there was one chapter with one paragraph that especially bothered a whole lot of people, where they argued that he was a